Throughout its entire existence, the Planet of the Apes films have been first and foremost a science fiction franchise. We've seen elements of drama, action, thriller, and even romance weaved into the series as well, but with Halloween upon us, I thought it would be fun to give my pitch for a Planet of the Apes film that embraces an entirely different genre, horror. If you like what I do here and want to show your support, be sure to hit the like button on this video. You can also join the Ape Nation Discord server for daily discussions about the franchise, and if you're interested in hearing my thoughts on all things film and entertainment outside of Planet of the Apes, you can check out my other channel, The Real Deal. If you're interested in seeing more of my videos here, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so that you can be sure to stay up to date on all things apes. Enjoy the video. Hey everybody, and welcome back to Ape Nation, your #1 source for all things Planet of the Apes on YouTube. My name is Josh, and I hope you guys have been having a great October and are having a fun Halloween today, because as some of you may know, this is my favorite holiday. Just like last year, I wanted to do something kind of spooky and a little bit special to celebrate, and so today I am giving you guys my pitch for a Planet of the Apes horror movie. Now, for those who don't know, or rather only just know me as the Planet of the Apes guy, I am a really big horror fan. I became obsessed with the genre when I was younger. I have been a big fan of the genre for a very long time, and while I'm not as caught up on it nowadays, I still really love it, and October is a big time of year for me to go back and revisit a bunch of my favorite horror movies, and I am also currently trying to get back into seeing as much modern stuff as I can, and so overall, I'm just a really big fan of the genre. I just love getting lost in tension and suspense, and I love when that tension and suspense is blended with haunting but stunning imagery, or horrific but memorable music, or terrifying but relatable themes, or all of the above and then some. I just think it's a really awesome genre that can lend itself to so many different types of stories and also so many different types of franchises, and that is why I think that a Planet of the Apes horror film could be something really cool. And a big reason for that is that I think that science fiction and horror have always felt like cousins to me. They're definitely different, but very similar and oftentimes very relatable to each other. Both are often used as vessels for artists who have something to say, whether it be something personal to them or something more socio-political or thematically relevant to things going on in the world, and both are also well known for how heavily they utilize special effects, both practical and CGI. Both of them have been used to do very similar things, just in different ways and appealing to different audiences. But for all of those reasons, I think when the two come together, they can also serve to satisfy the same audience or bring both of them together. So with all of that said, getting into what my vision for a Planet of the Apes movie would be, and we're gonna have a little bit of fun here because I've gone in and I've mapped out a bit of a story, not a full story, not like beginning, middle, and end. I would think of it more as an extended plot synopsis. But before I get into that, I wanted to give you an idea of kind of what this movie's gonna be, what it would be called, where my inspiration was kind of taken by, and then when I get to the end, I'll go over a couple general ideas about the types of things you could see in it, and also a couple ideas for what kind of director I would want to take on this story and deliver us a Planet of the Apes horror movie. My Planet of the Apes horror movie would be much smaller in scale than the Caesar trilogy or Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. It would be much more intimate, there would be a lot less locations, and there would be also just a lot less characters. It would be much simpler, much smaller. So that's the first thing to note. And when it comes to what inspired me for this Planet of the Apes horror pitch, the main inspiration for me was the beloved horror sci-fi classic from 1979, and that would be Ridley Scott's Alien. This is, of course, one of the most, if not the most iconic sci-fi horror film of all time. And once you hear what this story kind of is, you'll understand why it was such a heavy inspiration. With all of that said, let's kind of just dive right in here and start with the title. And the title for my pitch for a Planet of the Apes horror film is Hunters of the Planet of the Apes. Now, this is kind of a generic title and honestly probably more of a temporary title, but it's just the first thing I could think of and I thought it fit, so I decided to go with it. This movie, at its core, is basically Alien meets Planet of the Apes. I don't mean as in actually there are aliens in it, but more just the type of storytelling, filmmaking, and basic story premise of Alien, but taking place in the world of Planet of the Apes. And when I say in the world of Planet of the Apes, I specifically mean in the world of the modern Planet of the Apes films, and that is where this film is going to kick off. As we begin 30 years after the events of War for the Planet of the Apes, most humans now live in the shadows, with the majority of them no longer able to speak as a result of the ALZ-113 virus that spread several decades prior. Humans are not quite the dumb brutes seen in the original film or even Kingdom just yet, but their intelligence is somewhat limited to basic competence levels. They also do not yet wear things like loincloths, but rather old raggedy clothing that they've acquired through the years. My story focuses on a young human woman who comes from a small, quiet, primitive, mute human village, all of whom communicate using grunts and small noises, as well as their own form of sign language. The young woman's name is Lisa, which is an homage to Lisa from the original movies, and like a lot of other things about this pitch, this is a name that you could really just sub in with anything else. I just went with Lisa because it seemed like a decent enough name that fits into this world and isn't too modern, but also isn't too futuristic, and so I just went with it because I wanted something that homaged the original films, and so Lisa is what I landed on. Lisa, along with her father, her younger sister, and the rest of their small tribe, live in hiding from the intelligent apes who now dominate most of the world. She spends her days, along with other young humans her age, learning and performing basic skills like fishing, building, hunting, and whatever else is achievable and required to survive. She yearns to leave and see the rest of the world, but the adults of the tribe have strict rules about staying hidden and only certain people being allowed to go out when absolutely necessary. She has several friends who feel similarly to her, all of whom know nothing of the world before the apes. But turning things over to said apes, when we meet these apes for the first time before the two groups inevitably collide, we are introduced to a ruthless and rageful ape chieftain named Aldo, which is of course another homage to the original films, with this one being of course a reference to both the Aldo character from Battle for the Planet of the Apes, as well as the character mentioned as the first ape to say no in Escape from the Planet of the Apes. Aldo is preparing a small group of apes for a human hunt. These apes are strong, organized, but still fairly tribal, and still with limited speech abilities not too evolved from the age of Caesar. While many apes throughout the world leave humans alone and prefer to stay isolated, Aldo is driven by a primitive, violent belief that humans are a plague to be eradicated, not a species to be dominated or compromised with. While the teachings of Caesar are what guide many apes throughout the world, there are some who view Koba as the true savior, and Aldo may be his biggest zealot. Him, along with his two loyal ape followers, head out into the night to begin their regular hunt for humans, not to capture them, but to murder as many as they can find in the name of Koba. After both parties are introduced, the story begins as that same night, Lisa's younger sister, Kimmy, who is another homage name, this time being an homage to Kim Hunter, who of course played Zira, discovers an old portable boombox with a CD inside of it. On the cover is a list of songs, one of which is a song that the girl's mother used to hum to them when they were little. Lisa attempts to turn it on so that she can play it for Kimmy, but it won't turn on. Lisa turns the boombox around and discovers that it has an empty battery slot, realizing what the boombox needs in order to work. Lisa then remembers a map of the old world that her father had given her, which shows the location of an abandoned electronics store just a few miles away from the camp. She goes to get the map and pinpoints where she needs to go, but knows she shouldn't go out alone. She doesn't want to put her sister in danger by bringing her, so she wakes up a small group of her human friends and convinces them to go with her to find the batteries. Her friends, while reluctant at first, agree to join her on this simple but dangerous mission. Now, before I get any further, I do want to quickly address the whole boombox battery side of the story. This really is just to give these characters something to do, to drive them to go out into the night, and I wanted it to be something that was at least semi-personal to the characters. It shouldn't just be something generic or some random thing. I'm sure many of you might be able to come up with a different idea. We can workshop this together over time, but that's just an idea that I had that I thought would make sense, at least in this point in the timeline. As the group makes their way way out of the camp, wanting to see some excitement and not wanting to be left behind, Kimmy follows the group without her sister knowing. It isn't long before Kimmy accidentally reveals herself, making Lisa furious. But that anger is nothing compared to the terror that lies ahead, as the group now wanders out in the middle of the night alone with only basic weaponry in hand, such as knives or a bow and arrow. But it isn't enough to stop what quickly turns into a full-on attack, as out of nowhere, a spear flies out of the darkness and plunges through the chest of one of Lisa's friends. The apes have found the first kill of their hunt. Lisa takes her sister to flee the area, while the remaining other humans of their group split up and spread out. From this point forward, the film becomes an almost slasher-like survival story set in the woods in the middle of the night that sees most of our crew getting picked off one by the apes. So that is my overall pitch. Like I said up top, it's not the entire story. I don't go all the way to the end, but I do pretty much map out the majority of the first and a good amount of the second act with a little bit of details of what's to come and where it's going to ultimately go. And I think something that really excites me about a possibility about a movie like this is that you could utilize the environment, the woods, and just nature and night in general to create a really strong, really effective atmosphere and sense of dread. And you could also utilize the rage that an ape can exhibit in the real world to make them even scarier. And I think the combination of these two elements could make for something very scary, but also very grounded, despite the fact that these apes are much more intelligent than your average everyday ape. They can talk, they are smart, but they're still very primitive, they're very primal, and still act like apes. But because they are so organized and they are still so smart, that just makes them all the more terrifying. And I think that isolating the characters with multiple apes out there to find and go after each of them would create multiple different directions that you as an audience member would go along with each of those having the potential to make the apes and the overall situation that the humans are in more terrifying than the last. Another thing that got me excited was the idea of a story led by non-speaking characters. Because of the ALZ virus taking out the humans' ability to speak, there's a really cool opportunity here to tell a story that's not very heavy on dialogue, which can have a big impact once you get into the real meat of what the film would be, because silence can be such a powerful tool when building suspense and an atmosphere that's meant to make people feel scared. It also creates a really fun filmmaking challenge of creating characters that you care about and want to root for without being able to rely on spoken dialogue. It's all physicality and emotion, with some help from sign language, of course. But even more exciting, I think, is the opportunity to almost redefine the apes, or at least give viewers a new perspective of them that turns them into something to be feared, which hasn't really been seen in the franchise since the original film from 1968. Obviously, the main appeal of the franchise since then has definitely become more about the apes and their stories and getting people compelled to root for them, so I would definitely get why something like this could turn a good amount of fans away, as they might not want to see the apes as the villains, especially ones that are this violent and going around killing humans. But for a one-off horror-influenced story, I'd be all for it. Like I said earlier, Alien was a big inspiration for this concept, and as such, the apes would essentially be taking on the xenomorph role as a group of ruthless animals that are in full-on predator mode and taking out each of these characters in violent, suspenseful, and often terrifying ways. Maybe you could argue that would make it a bit more like Aliens, the second film in that franchise, but for me it was more the slower burn and darker overall tone and style of Alien that I would want to see implemented here. But moving on from the overall story idea that I had, now I want to shift things over to what kind of filmmaker I would want to see tackle a Planet of the Apes movie like this. I have three different options, all I think fairly different types of directors. The first one on my list is Fede Alvarez. I think that Fede Alvarez is a fantastic director. I love his movies. His Evil Dead reboot, in my opinion, is the best Evil Dead movie outside of Evil Dead 2. Don't Breathe was fantastic, and Alien Romulus, to me, is the best Alien movie since James Cameron's Aliens, though I'd actually argue it might even be the best one since the original. I just think that he's really good at telling dark, messed up stories about people that you really grow to care about. He also has an eye for viscerality that's really strong, and I love how tension-driven his work has been so far. To me, he's the most logical choice for this kind of movie, as he's worked on franchises before and knows how to work within that mold. And so for all of those reasons, Fede Alvarez is the first director on my list of who I would want to take on a Planet of the Apes horror movie. The next filmmaker on my list is one that most of you probably haven't heard of, and that would be Arkasha Stevenson. Now, she does not have nearly as big of of a resume as Fede Alvarez or the third director that I'm going to name after this, but her one film, The First Omen, to me was one of the biggest surprises of 2024, as she made what I think is the best Omen film since the original, which as far as horror movies go is one of my all-time favorites. Her commitment to such a serious tone and almost gothic aesthetic made for something that was not just scary, but genuinely unsettling. She was also able to reinvigorate a franchise that's been basically dead for decades in a way that felt creative and new while still honoring the legacy of the source material. And similar to Fede Alvarez, she has worked within the framework of franchise filmmaking before and has shown to be quite good at it. And so for all of those reasons, Arkasha Stevenson is a director that I would love to see get a chance to make a Planet of the Apes horror movie. And finally, the last director on my list of people who I would want to see take on a movie like this, and ultimately if I had complete say and I knew this person would be interested in doing it and I knew it would be possible and money was no object and nothing else was of consequence, then this is absolutely the person that I would pick to do it. But the reality is this is more of a dream pick than a realistic one, and that would be Robert Eggers. And the reason that it's more of a dream pick is because I know that Robert Eggers would never ever do a movie like this. That being said, I would be really thrilled if he did. Robert Eggers to me is a phenomenal filmmaker. I think The Witch is probably my favorite horror movie of the 21st century, and the immense feeling of dread and the snowballing out of control structure of that story is exactly what I would want for a movie like this. I think that he would take the material incredibly serious and would make the apes really, really scary in a way that I don't think audiences would even be prepared for. And I think that he might even try to use practical effects, at least partially. I will say that a Robert Eggers Planet of the Apes movie, horror or otherwise, would most likely be the most out there and unconventional from what you might expect, which is something that I personally would really love, but others might not be as into. And so he could be a little too much of an auteur for a franchise film, especially something like Planet of the Apes. That being said, I still think it would be an amazing choice. I would love to see him do it, and if Planet of the Apes were to ever give us some sort of story set within the horror realm, he is the guy that I think would be the most exciting to take the job. So for all of those reasons, Robert Eggers is the final person on my list of who I would want to see take on a Planet of the Apes horror film. Now, after going through that entire story and going through all those directors and all of my experience with the genre, the ultimate question is, could we ever actually see something like this happen? While I would love to see a Planet of the Apes horror movie, and I do think that it could be really fun and really exciting, I have to be honest, I am very much willing to bet that we will never ever see something like this happen. The truth is, these types of movies are very expensive, and there is just no chance that the studio would risk making something like this, which has a lot less widespread appeal, and losing a lot of their audience. There is a possibility that it could be done for a lower cost, since it's all essentially one type of location, and you could also get all unknown or at least lesser known actors, but even then I don't think we would ever see the studio go for a less mass appeal, scaled down movie that comes from a franchise of the size and pedigree of Planet of the Apes. But I want to know what you guys think. If you're a horror fan and a Planet of the Apes fan like I am, is a movie like this, or even just something kind of similar, something that you would ever want to see? What do you think of my pitch? Do you think it would work? Do you have any notes for me? Do you think there's anything I could do to tweak the story? Maybe I could come back to it and we could workshop it together? I don't know, you let me know. But I also want to know, if you're not much of a horror fan, would you still go to see this type of movie as a Planet of the Apes fan if it was set in that world? I want to know all of your thoughts down in the comments below. Thank you so much for checking out today's video here on Ape Nation. If you liked this video, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so that you can stay up to date on all things apes. I'll catch you in the next one, so until then, goodbye.